Something I noticed is that I didn't show you guys how to set up your Photoshop interface so that it's like mine for drawing and painting. So a couple things is, right off the bat at the top here, a lot of times you are all in Essentials mode. It's the default when you open Photoshop. So I'm going to click this and I go down to Painting. Now you'll notice here, if you're still learning about color and the color wheel, I sometimes often will have the color wheel open as my settings here, and you'll notice that's this option here. When you switch over to painting, this hue cue is great. Like like last tutorial, I believe I just left the hue cue up because all I'm looking at is like pencil lines and things like that. But when I start to digitally paint, I usually just switch over to the color wheel like that, so I can look at like complementary colors and all that good stuff. The next thing is, if you're painting in Photoshop, and what you're noticing is that as you're drawing out that your pen pressure isn't there, or you don't have a really nice fall off like this, where see how it fades off the edges. It could be a couple things. One, your brush isn't set up right, and I'll show you how to do that. And two, you might not have the Wacom Properties set up. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Shift, and I'm going to type in, Windows key, and I'm going to hit WAC, and I'm going to open up my Wacom tablet properties. Now, by default, Wacom doesn't load in your different applications. You probably, when you open this, only have all other on, right? And what you want to do is, with Photoshop open, click this plus sign, and you want to add Photoshop into your application just by hitting OK. Now, what you'll have essentially is you'll have this. It should be able to detect the pen pressure. But here's the issue: inside of Photoshop, you will not. Even after you set this up and you go through these settings, you check your pen pressure, your eraser, all of your mapping, and then for me, for Photoshop, for example, it's a screen area full. I don't like to use my whole tablet. I like to use a little part of it just when I'm thumbnail sketching. So you can see I've adjusted that way. And the way to do that is you go to tablet area portion, it'll open this up, and you can adjust the portion area where you want to sketch. Now, even with this open, you should be able to close it and have no problem. The other thing is you can just minimize it. If you notice that when you do close it, it turns off your sensitivity. You also probably need to restart Photoshop after you've brought it into the Wacom properties. The next thing is where do you access, or how do you access your brushes, right? Well, this little guy here is your brush settings, but in order to get to your actual brushes, you go down here to Window and then turn on Brushes, and you can see your brushes. Now, if you don't see your brush settings here, right, like say it's closed, you can access it in two other ways when you have brush on. And that's by clicking this guy here or this guy here, and those will both open your brush settings. Now, if you want to use a pencil versus a paintbrush, you hold the Shift key and B, and you can switch between these two options. So if you just press B versus your paintbrush here. So now I actually have my hard press brush open. So that's Shift B to switch between all these different brush options. Okay, so where did I get all of these brushes? Well, many of them are, by default, they come with Photoshop, right? But what I love to do is go to ArtStation and download brushes and test them out. So let me show you how to do that. So here we are at artstation.com, and this is not only just for free brushes. If you're not familiar with it, it's, I have an ArtStation. Most people have an ArtStation account. It's for unbelievably great inspiration. So inside of here, all I'm going to do is type in free Photoshop brushes, and you'll notice we have all of these great brushes. Some for oils, acrylics, different types of brushes. I like these, where it says Papers and Pencils free version. I actually use these brushes a lot, and you can just kind of see that. I mean, they're great for sketching. They're great for a little bit of painting and stuff like that. Now, let's take a look at how to download and install these. Well, first we want to sign into our account. So I'm going to pause the video and sign in. And then you'll notice here, he says from Michael, and you click on that, and add to library, and tip them if you like. View in your library, and then you can just download the brushes. So I'm going to go to desktop, I'm going to save that. I'm going to wait for that to download and then unzip it. Now, to bring those brushes in, you can click these three options here and go to Import Brushes. And then I'm going to navigate to the desktop, look for these MA brushes, and you can see we have this ABR file. Now, if I hit load, what it'll do is it'll stack it on the bottom here. You can see now I have my different types of brushes loaded in. Now, you don't necessarily need at all to install any of these brushes. They're just kind of nice texturing brushes. A nice pencil brush here you can use. Just different brushes. To be completely honest with you, some of the default ones that come with it, like these Strive Media or the soft round, all work. I tend to just like a hard brush that I can adjust on my own like this with some fall off. So let's take a look at how you set up your brush. So if you click here, like I said before, and we can even drag this off to undock it, there's a couple things that you need to make sure that are on. So starting at the top here where it says brush tip size, for me, you want to make sure that your spacing and your pixel size are essentially set to a 100% hardness and a roughly like smaller amount of spacing, between 1 to 5%. You don't want to paint with something like this, where you have a lot of faded, uncomfortable strokes across it. The reason for that is when you're first drawing these harder you want to look at an actual color almost like with no shape around it, and then you want to smooth out the edges yourself through color sampling. And I'll do a whole video on digital painting later, just sort of take my word for it. When we go to shape dynamics, size and jitter, some people will leave this completely off. I leave mine on pen pressure, and if we turn this off, what you'll notice is it doesn't take into any pen pressure the width of the drawing or the width of your pen tip as you're drawing. So with that on, now you can see if I tap lightly, it just kind of falls off, or it lets me do some nice little strokes like this. So something like that. And the last thing is just smoothing. Now, I like to have smoothing on because it cleans up the distance between my two dots, right? Like, so as I'm painting, if I leave smoothing off, and it's not going to be as noticeable here, but by and large, it cleans up the stroke and the edges of my stroke. So with it on, I don't know if you can see that, probably a little bit more apparent when I have a gradient off the side of my edges. So this is my, essentially these are my default settings, just that first when I'm doing some digital drawing. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close that out because we know how to get that back. So those are essentially just sort of my default settings, how to load in brushes, things like that. Another thing you'll see me do a lot, and I might forget to announce, is as I'm drawing, you'll all of a sudden see the entire interface disappear. You can do that through Tab, or sometimes I like to switch my interface by pressing the F key, and that hides some of the parameters I don't need. Like, for example, like sometimes I don't want to look at the Windows bar, I just want to look at the drawing, so I'll hit F. I'll press F again if I just want to draw for a while. I'm happy with the brush I have, and I just want to practice or work on my sketch. And the other thing is just to press Tab to bring it all back to where you were. So I think that's enough for now. What we'll do in the next video is jump back into reworking or shifting these eyes forward. I'm noticing that, finishing the mouth, and maybe do a little bit of just sort of how the anatomy of a body will work, and then we'll finish this side in maybe 2 videos, and then we can start modeling.